Let's do some drywall.
Drywall repairman here. Look, we got a patch to do in a garage. They accidentally hit the garage wall while playing, looks like hockey. Kids were playing in the garage. Accidents happen. So that's why we're here. Got called out to fix this. Easy patch, 2x2 patch. It kind of cracks off the butt joint here. I asked the homeowner if they wanted to pay a little extra to fix this crack since it goes up 4 foot. They opted not to fix this crack. So, okay. So I'm just going to take the crack up a little bit, a foot or so past it. I'm not going to fix the full length of it. I offered to fix it for another $20 and they didn't want to pay it. So, hey, we're just going to do what we're told to do. Basically, I'm just going to cut out this area. First step, put down some masking. It's right next to the baseboard, so I'm going to go ahead and mask off the baseboard. Put some plastic, basically to catch my debris. It looks like this part here just hit the stud, so we're center on the stud. So we're just center on the stud, we're good here. So I'm just going to have to cut it out, square it up, and put some wood backing behind it. I'm also going to keep a piece of the cutout, small piece, like a 6" by 6". That way the homeowner could take it to a paint store and get a paint match. Easy enough. Drywall repairs, this common thing happens in everybody's house, especially you got roughhousing kids, playing hockey, playing in the garage, stuff happens, accidents happens. Most common repairs, size like this, small patch like a 1x1, 2x2 patch, basic patch. Everybody's going to have to do one patch at least in their home ownership lifetime. So let's get to work. Like I said, first things first, mask off the floor and get this area cut out nice and square. Get some of the dust off the baseboard here. That way the masking tape will stick. I just like to use basic masking tape. I know a lot of people like to use blue tapes and stuff like that. Those are way expensive. So I just use a basic masking tape. 1.5" roll like this is perfect. 2" tape. Let's go ahead and mask off now. It's easy to put the masking down now so it catches all of our demo debris. It's stuck on a dusty baseboard, so I like to push down extra hard to make sure that tape's really bonded on there. A piece of plastic works. If you don't have plastic, you can use a tarp, old sheet, anything. Newspaper, I've seen it all. You just want to catch your debris. That's the job here. This plastic, I'm working in a garage, it's kind of windy, so I'm just going to tap down the edges of my plastic so it's not blowing everywhere. Backing. Several things could be used for backing. I like to use 1x2s. These are cheap and easy. I'll just go ahead and pull the area out. They really hit this pretty hard, so I'm going to keep a piece like this. They can use that for a paint match. They don't need a big piece, but you want to get at least like a 2" to 4", so 6x6" piece is more than enough. They can take that to paint match at any paint store. So always keep a piece of your cutouts for your paint match. You may think you have the matching paint hidden away, and then you find out you don't have the matching paint. Well, it's not easy to match paints if you don't have the matching piece of drywall or the original paint. Good piece of drywall. Tape seam, I'm not going to get too crazy with them. I'm going to just fix the whole crack. They're going to get a little extra on this one. I really have to fix it because it goes right on the edge of this. So where do you start and where do you stop? My patch would be patched here, and then since I didn't fix the crack, it would have probably just cracked out my seam next to my patch. It's a butt seam. That's why it broke right on the center of the stud right here. Because it's right on the butt seam that broke. So they hit it right in the sweet spot. That's why it broke so easy. So there's several ways you could do this. If you want to really cut it back out, you can go to the center of the next stud. The center of the next stud's right here. I can tell because there's pop-outs, screws, so you can cut it back. But if you want to do much work like that, you could use a T-square like this and make a level. If you don't have a T-square, a piece of wood, a level, anything like that, you could take that and just pencil it so you can mark your area. I have my T-square on hand, so I'm just going to find the edge of this broken. I always like to check the inside, the broken edge, because sometimes it breaks inside. So it's solid right there. So I just like to go to the highest point, pencil it, pencil it. Easy enough. T-square is nice like this because you can run the T part right on it. That way you can cut out a nice square area. Maybe you don't know how to do sheetrock, you're not confident in doing it. Well, I know you're confident enough to at least do this part and at least cut it out. Just by you cutting out the area and getting it squared up, you might save some money if you do hire someone to come fix it. So at least do what you're comfortable doing. I'm just cutting this out with a razor blade. You can use a router, you can use a sawzall, little hand saw. They call them jab saws. They work good too. You can use a jab saw. These make a little more thrust. The jab saw works good. It's just a little hand saw. They're perfect for sheetrock. That's why they always have them in the sheetrock aisle. They make perfect good saws to cut out stuff like this. Since I already made a line, I know where to cut it. I'm not just cutting a round patch. I'm cutting it out nice and square. Insulation here. If you want to really clean up your cut, you can take a razor blade. Of course, get all the rough edges. If you really want to get down to detail, you're going to be patching this in and mudding this whole area. So you're just trying to get a nice square cut out so you can get a piece of sheetrock. If you didn't want to do this pencil technique, you could always did a pre-cut piece of drywall and just put the piece of sheetrock there and templed it out and marked it. Wood backing. These also make a good rasp. Take that rough edge of that sheetrock. Backing, it can go this way, that way, whatever way. I'll just do one this way on the bottom. Since the bottom's next to that baseboard, I want a nice tight bottom. Sheetrock here is kind of ragged, so you want to make sure you get all that off. And put a piece there. I might run a piece there. I might even do another piece there. Why not? Let's get this sheetrock backing put in. That way we can have something to screw our sheetrock to. Also, your old stud, always put an old screw in your old sheetrock to tighten it up. This got loose because it got removed. So you want to make sure your old sheetrock's tightened down. Always add screws to your... Also the stud here, I see a nail pop, they call it. So I'm going to put another screw right on that one. If you miss the stud, kick it over to the right or left where the stud is. Tighten it up. It's actually not a nail pop, it's a screw pop. So I'm going to set their old screw. Give me another one up there. So now I know this is tight and this is tight. Your backing, go ahead and go put some screws in it. Always get at least 2 to 4 screws in your backing. That way it doesn't pop when you're trying to put the sheetrock, new sheetrock in. I like to get one on each edge, maybe one in the middle. One screw won't work. You're going to have to need at least 2 or 3 screws to tighten up that backing. There's other types of backing you can use, of course, 2x4s, 4x4s, wood sheeting. Some guys like to use those metal clips. Those metal clips are awesome, but they do get expensive. If I had to buy metal clips for every patch I did, I probably wouldn't make any money. If I was sponsored by any company that makes those clips, I'd greatly use them, and I would make videos on how to use those metal clips. Hint, hint to any sponsors out there, or anybody that sells drywall tools, materials. I will use your product, and if it's good, I'll greatly give it great reviews, but if I hate it, I'll let you know. I don't tend to buy a bunch of different materials out there. I stick to what I use every day because I know they work. Plenty of screws on that, plenty of screws on that. Everything's ready. I always also scrape the outside edge, any loose stuff, any boogers, get that out of there so when you go to mud, it doesn't hit the mud. Go ahead and measure your piece of sheetrock. Looks like a 2x2, but you want to still measure it. Also, and write down your measurements. say 12.5 here, 12.5 by 15.5. So 15.5 by 12.5. Sometimes you don't want to remember, just write it down on a piece of scrap paper. 12.5 by 15. Alright, so go ahead and hang your sheetrock. Also check the depth. Sometimes you have 5/8 sheetrock or 1/2 inch. All you have to do is measure the sheetrock to know what you have. Looks like here we got some 1/2 inch sheetrock. So go ahead and cut your sheetrock and then you can install it. Now with your new sheetrock, you have something to screw to. All 4 sides are going to be tight. This is going to be a strong patch once we get the new sheetrock installed. Got the sheetrock piece cut. Let's see if it fits. Sometimes they're tight. Oh, it's pretty good. You could always cut it back with your razor if it's really tight. If you have small gaps, don't worry about it. You can always pre-fill those. Once your piece is ready, go ahead and put screws in it. I always start with the original stud. Of course, that's the strongest point. So you put some screws. One on top, one on bottom. Now you can go to town adding screws. Every, I would say 2 to 4 inches, add plenty of screws. All your backing that you add, now you have something to screw to. You're basically going to have this screwed down to all 4 sides. Really strong patch. This is the best way of doing it. Doesn't get any better than this. 2 sides is good enough. If you get ideal 4 sides, that's the ideal perfect patch. All 4 sides tighten down. Very strong patch. Alright. Once you get it all hung, always double check your scrape your edges. That just gets any goobers, any high spots off. It just makes it a lot easier to mud. If you get all that loose stuff off and any high points. Your mud hits any high points, the screws sticking out or anything, it's going to chatter. Spray glue, this is optional. I only like to use spray glue on old walls because it gives the fiberglass mesh tape a better bonding. This is an optional product. I have it, so I'm going to use it. Fiberglass mesh tape. Don't mind the yellow mesh tape. I got this off a job. This is a good stuff. The only reason it's yellow so you can see your tape under your coat work. I prefer just the white mesh tape. The mesh tape works good. It's a strong product. You always see this at the stores. You'll see other people talk about this or that. Well, the major stores are going to sell what works. They're not going to sell what doesn't work because they have a return policy. So if the major stores sell a product, then more than likely it's a good product if you use it correctly. I use this on all my repairs, patchwork especially, because that way I can turn around and mud it. You don't use paper tape. Paper tapes are meant for like fire taping, mostly done with the bazooka. With paper tapes, if you don't have enough mud, thin mud under the paper, it will get blisters. So this is an easier tape to work with, even though it's yellow. But now you know what needs to be coated, and now you can see it. Visually see that everything's taped up with the yellow tape. Now that I got it all sheetrock hung and taped, I'm going to go ahead and put away all my hanging tools. No need to get my tools covered in mud, lose them in the plastic. Sometimes I'm in the middle of doing a job and my tools get covered with demo debris like this, and then I lose a tool. I just lost a nice razor blade sheetrock knife the other day that I can't find, and that was my best sheetrock knife ever. So now I'm out of a tool because I didn't clean up the area when I was done. So I always clean up the area now, put away my tools. Even I forget sometimes if I'm in a hurry in a job and trying to get it finished, or a lot's going on, and I walk away without putting my tools away. Like I said, keep a piece of cutout like that for the paint match. They can take that to Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever paint stores they want to go to. Whoever's good at matching paint, just need to type that in there and say, hey, please, can I get a matching color like this, without knowing. They're not going to match dirt, wear and tear, but they can get a pretty good match. Always use the original paint if you have it. But we're ready for mudding. I'm going to mud this with the first coat with the hot mud. I use 5-minute muds. You know, in all my videos, I'm a drywall repairman. I do most of my jobs in one trip, so I have to use a hot mud. If you never mudded before, please use a joint compound. Joint compounds are easier to work with. If you make a mistake, you can sand away your mistake. With hot muds, once they set up like a cement. So you get what you get with a hot mud. So you got to know what you're doing with the hot muds. I'm going to do this with the hot mud. But go ahead and put away your hanging tools. Now you can get ready to mud work. You always want a nice fresh bucket of water. Of course, a nice sponge. These are the best sponges to use. If you don't have a sponge, I guess you can use a rag. But if you're going to be in home improvement stuff, you might want to have one of these sponges. I use a 5-minute. I keep it in a bucket like this and keep a lid on it, scoop it as I need it. But this is my 5-minute bucket. Basic tools I use, of course, I'm a pan and knife kind of guy. I don't use a hawk and trowel. I'm in the West Coast. West Coast, we use pans and knives. You could use a 10-inch, 12-inch knife. I just opted into one knife only, my 12-inch knife and of course your 6-inch knife. Easy, easy, easy. For mixing the powder form, these guys have all these different techniques. All you have to do is just scoop it in, put it in your pan. Scoop it in, put it in your pan. This is a bigger pan than usual. Most pans you buy in the store, like a 12-inch or a 14-inch pan. This is an 18-inch pan, a bigger pan. I like the bigger pans because they can mix more mud. I always put the lid back in my hot mud, so when I work with the water droplets don't fall in my hot mud. Easy, just add some fresh water. Fresh water, why? Well, if you use dirty waters, sometimes the chemicals in the dirty waters will make the mud set up faster or make them not even set up at all. So fresh water, always use fresh water whenever you're doing a project. I'm sure that goes the same for other trades, tile guys and stuff like that. You don't want to use dirty water. Just always clean out your bucket, have a washout area. Mix this up thoroughly. I'm just going to mix it up like this, toss and turn using a 6-inch knife. This is the easiest way. Just take your time, mix it up thoroughly. It is a first coat mud, so mix it up thick, thick, thick. Heavy, heavy, heavy pancake batter consistency. Almost like a bread batter, I'd say. Toss and turn, you're just trying to get that water to the bottom of it. If you put too much water in it, just go ahead and dump out some water. If you didn't put enough, go ahead and put a little more. No big deal. Some guys like to add a little more powder. As for me, I just dump out the extra water and just mix what you can use. This is a hot mud, so you only want to mix up a pan at a time. If this was a bigger job and I had guys helping me and I had to do a bunch of patches, I'd probably do like a 20-minute, 40-minute, or even a 90-minute hot mud. If I didn't plan on finishing this job in one trip, then I would just use a regular joint compound. Regular joint pound's what I recommend you use. Just use a joint compound. You won't have any issues. Scrape the sides, make sure you get all the dry powder form mixed up thoroughly. It's not super thick, but it's good enough to coat with. So I'm going to take my coating knife, my 12-inch knife, and let's go ahead and get a first coat on that patch. Alright, with the first coat, like on all my videos, if you watch a couple of my videos, you'll start to learn the technique. Striking that tape. Get that mud pushed inside any gap. Get inside all the crevices of the fiberglass mesh tape. I always do this beforehand. Some guys like to pre-fill beforehand before they tape. That's fine. But if you push this mud in there, it's going to get in the little gap there. I'm just going to go ahead and fix this crack. Let's go a little something for nothing. Now you're ready to coat. So this one you want to use a 12-inch knife or 10-inch. Blow out the patch, nice and heavy. Notice I'm pushing my knife. I'm not standing my knife out. I'm not taking mud off. I'm putting mud on. Putting mud on. I want to put it fairly heavy to coat the patch. Coat the patch. First coat's not going to be perfect. First coat's just meant to fill in the deep spot. The second coat is there to make it better, and the third coat's really to make it even dial it in even perfect. Feather your edges, feather your edges, feather your edges. Sometimes on these patches I like to go right down the middle like that, and then I'll feather the side, feather the side. I'd be tempted to just hit this again, but I'm just going to let it dry. And mix too much mud, always with hot muds, you're going to have to clean your pan right away. You can't reuse this mud, unfortunately. Sometimes you mix a little too much, that's fine. That's why I don't like to mix big, heavy pans You'd be surprised what a pan of mud can do and how much it can coat. This is a 5-minute mud, so I'm just going to let it set up. 5 minutes tend to set up in about 4 to 6 minutes. If you're using a 20-minute, usually I check it between the 15 to 22-minute mark. 40 minutes the same, like a 35 to 45-minute, yada yada yada. So just keep an eye on this. It gives you plenty of time to wash your pans and knives, clean up. Next up, you're going to have to slick out hot muds. I have videos on my channel on how to slick out hot muds. We're going to slick this out. Slicking out hot muds, that's only done with hot muds. It's not done with joint compounds. If this was a joint compound, I'm going to have to let this dry overnight, come back tomorrow, and sand it down with like a 80 grit, 150 grit, sand it down, then follow it through with the second coat, the joint compound, let that dry, come back, sand it, maybe follow it through with a third coat. This is a skip trowel, so maybe you don't have to do a texture like this, but the coating process is the same. 1 coat, 2 coat minimum. If you're doing it yourself, maybe 3 or even a 4th coat to make a perfectly smooth patch. But go ahead, let's let this set up. Let's clean up our tools. When we come back in here, it'll be ready to slick out. I'm going to take a damp sponge, slick it all out, feather the edges, and then it'll be ready for a second coat. Alright, about 5 minutes. Look at that. It's still damp, but you can touch it. So go ahead and take your sponge. This is the slick out technique. Always get rid of the edges, base area, a little more detail to it. Take a damp, clean 6-inch knife, and we're basically going to feather it. I'm pushing down pretty hard here. I'm pushing down, taking that extra material off. Need be, I can go the opposite direction I coated in, push a little extra around where it meets the base area so there's not a big clump of mud on the bottom. You could take the extra mud on here and fill in any scratches, deep areas, stuff like that. That's why you got to work with this mud as it's setting up. You can't do it after it sets up. I know on the bag it says easy sanding, but you don't sand hot muds. Take that extra mud off, double check your edges, double check your edges. That's a pretty good coat right there. That first coat slicked out is better than most guys' 3 coats. So we're just going to follow through with a tight second coat just to fill in the chatters and deep areas. Same thing like before, I'm just going to mix it in the pan. Some hot minute, 5-minute mud. I don't need as much. The yellow tape, so you can kind of see the yellow tape, so it kind of tells you that it's not coated enough. So it kind of gives you an idea where the area needs more work. That's ideal with those colored tapes, so you can see the tape bleeding through. That shows you just visually that it needs to be coated more without even actually putting your hands on the patch. So let's go ahead, do a second coat. If you're not using a hot mud, just use a joint compound. Second coat. I'm going to use my 12-inch knife. Second coat is a little bit thinner than the first coat. You don't want it thicker than the first coat. Go ahead and take your mud, go past your original first coat. This patch is still kind of deep, so I'm going to leave it on heavy. I like to get all my mud on to my pan, then I'll feather the edges. Feather your edges, feather your edges. Feather your edges. You got a little extra mud there from feathering edges, so I'm just going to put it on the center of the patch. A little more detail in the bottom. This time I'm going to go the opposite direction that I did the first coat. This helps fill in any chatters. You don't have to do this way, but it helps since this is such a deep patch. If the patch is still deep after I slick out this, it may need a third coat, but we'll see after we slick it out. So with that second coat set up, same thing there, clean up your tools. Clean up your tools. Don't put your tools and walk away from your tools. Clean them up. As this is setting up, always clean out your tools. Let's give this a few minutes. Since it's a 5 minutes, it's going to take 5 minutes or so to set up. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll slick out the hot mud and see what it looks like. If it's still bad, then we'll have to do a third coat. If not, then it'll be ready for texture. Texture here is a skip trowel. We have a lot of skip trowel in the houses out here because there's a lot of new builds out here. So anything 20 years old or so has these skip trowels. Most track houses and stuff like that, new builds, these HOA type community houses, townhouses, stuff like that, usually have skip trowel. Newer homes. Older homes have spray textures like knockdowns. It's more 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even early 90s. But most of the newer homes that are about 20 years old or so or newer have these skip trowels. Go ahead and let this set up. Next step will be to slick out. In a few minutes, check this. Yep, still damp, but it's workable. Working time. Get rid of your edges. Damp, clean sponge. base area, just like the first coat. Clean, straight 6-inch knife. Sometimes I like to even add a little bit of moisture to the patch. Slick it out, 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 slick it out. Gotta go over every bit of the patch. Take a little bit of practice to use the hot mud. Like I said, this is more a professional grade type material. It's easier as a newbie, beginner. You're just doing drywall one time, patching up a hole one time. Just use a joint compound. Takes a little longer, but it's easier to sand away your mistakes if you do make a muddy mistake. You can try to sand away this hot mud, but good luck. Hope you like trying to sand cement, because it's about the kind of energy you're going to use is trying to sand cement. Take off your extra mud, double check your edges, your base area, got rid of all the edges. It's already setting up. Let's just give it another minute to set up or so. My next step, it's good and straight, so I don't need a third coat. Since I did slick out techniques in between coats, it's almost like a 4 coats that I did really. We're going to do a skip trowel. If you're going to leave your patch smooth, just go ahead and follow it through with a tight skim coat of joint compound to leave it smooth. And one last final coat. Just skim it real tight with the joint compound. It'll be a nice, perfectly smooth patch. If you have a texture, if you think you're going to tackle to match the texture, then knock yourself out. This is a skip trowel, so I'm just going to use a joint compound. I don't use hot muds on my textures. I know some guys out there will try to use a hot mud, that way they can turn around and paint it the same day. As for me, I only use joint compounds or toppings for textures. I won't use hot muds because it just doesn't look original. It's always rough. You can always see the patch if you use hot muds for textures. Sure, it'll look okay, it'll pass, but it's not going to be 100% perfect. So we're going to do the skip trowel here. While this sets up, I'm going to go ahead and get myself set up for mudding with the joint compound to do the texture. As you can see, that patch is coming together nicely. Fix the seam there. Little patch turned into a big patch, and then once we texture it up, it's even going to go further out to feather it out, further and wider. You always take your texture out way past your patch area to blend in nicely. So go ahead, let's get ready for texture. I'm going to need a joint compound. Compounds I have here from the last job I was just at. So you have to mix it up pretty good. I'm just going to scrape it right out of my bucket. I keep it a bucket with a lid. The consistency of texture, most textures, if not all, I would say is like a heavy, creamy pancake batter. I'm not going to need a lot of texture here. I'm just going to use my 6-inch knife to put it on. So that's all I need. Some joint compound that's mixed up. If you have any clumps in your mud, you're going to have to strain it out. So you don't want clumps in your mud. You want a nice, creamy joint compound. If it's too thick, you're going to have to add a little bit of water and mix it up really good so there's no water. The skip trowel is the same. With the skip trowel, I just kind of dip it in my pan or scoop just a little bit so it's even on the knife. And then you just kind of follow the outside edge until you can get the pattern. So you can get the pattern going. If you're trying to practice skip trowel, maybe on an old piece of sheetrock or a piece of cardboard, you can practice your technique until you get a technique and your mud just right. You could watch 100 YouTube videos, doesn't mean you're going to learn how to skip trowel. This is just done by practice. Outside edge helps the old pattern on the existing wall start your new pattern. Kind of gives you the dot size you need. I like skip trowels because you don't have to pull out the spray rig, you don't have to mask off everything. Easier to do, match. Any light areas, you can put some skip in it, no big deal. Your job is to match. You're never going to get a 100% perfect match if you're matching someone else's work. So my job is to get my jobs 98, 99% matching. Basic, make it look like there was never a hole there, never a patchwork done. That's the whole goal. think all the mud's on there. Double check the edges, take it out further and wider, and then you're going to have to lightly knock down the area. Knock down your, double check around your base area, that it's right down to the base. Go ahead and knock it down. Knock it down, knock it down, knock it down. Any which way, every way, it doesn't matter. You're just knocking it down. Once they get this texture dried, they'll just follow through and they'll sand it. Sanding will take any rough spots, high edges, grittiness out of the texture. Because joint compounds, they're not hot muds. Joint compounds are creamier, softer mud, but they still feel gritty. If you don't sand them, you'll see a rough, gritty patch on your wall. I don't know if you ever looked at people's houses or when you walk somewhere and you see walls and you see imperfections, rough spots on the walls. Well, those spots never got sanded before they primered in paint. So you always want to sand most, if not all, textures, and then primer and paint. You sand it, it has to be primered and paint. The only textures you don't sand, I would say, is like an orange peel, splatter. The majority of the textures need to be sanded with 150 grit to 220 grit sandpaper, or just like a finer medium sanding block. Nothing to it, it's a skip trowel patch. Easy, easy. It's all textured out. It's in a garage, so it'll dry fairly quickly. It'll be dry by tonight, but I'm going to tell the homeowner just give it overnight to dry. Kept a piece of drywall cut out so they can take that to paint match. Next step, sand all that area lightly. Just sand it lightly. You don't want to sand it hard. You don't want to take away the texture. Sand it, primer it, then paint. I have several videos on my channel. I have a whole playlist of patch repairs like this. Watch a few videos, just see how it's done. Some of my videos are repetitive, but this is a drywall channel. I'm not here working on cars, I'm doing drywall. So there's a lot of videos on just drywall only. So go ahead and please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Simple job like this is something you can do yourself. Maybe you see what's involved and you realize that you have to buy a lot of product, materials, and then you have to do it yourself. So sometimes it's easier just to hire a professional in the smaller jobs, because by the time you go buy the basic supplies and you do it yourself, you're already halfway into it. So just hire a professional if you're not confident in doing it. If you're confident in doing it, do what you can. Do up to the point that you're confident, and then hire a professional to finish the rest. Maybe just getting the patch ready, cut out, even sheetrock, you can save a few dollars. But hey, I hope you like this video. I have several videos coming out. I need some more watch time. I'll start producing better content if I get more watch time. I get monetization. I get a penny here, a penny there for every time you guys watch a commercial. You give me a like, you leave me a comment, YouTube algorithm will find my video. It'll link me up to other drywall repair channels. There's a whole lot of them out there. But I can tell you what, I'm an actual licensed drywaller working in the field. Sure, some criticize my techniques, but hey, I'm out here working while they're criticizing. So I hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up. Give me a like. All cleaned up. Let your patches always dry overnight. Keep pets away from it. Kids, they're curious. They always want to touch it. Go buy it. Especially cats. Cats really like drywall mud, wet mud. So just keep your animals away from it, kids away from it. Block it off if you have to. But always just let your patches, drywall repairs, dry overnight. Don't try to rush dry them. I know everybody thinks you got to put a fan on them to dry it. It'll dry it out all right. It'll dry out the top, but not the inside. Sometimes you create cracks. So it's better just to let the air flow, open a door or window, and just let it naturally dry for patches. Don't speed dry it unless you're really in a hurry. It's better to slow dry than fast dry joint compounds. Hope you liked the video. Like I said, give me a like.